And Ilan Pappé's latest book was called The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. And in that book, he argues that the documents which the U.S. State Department posts on its website for its definition of ethnic cleansing fit like a hand in a glove the actual history of what went on in Palestine from 1946 to 1948. The objectives of what was implemented between 46 and 48 were stated by the Zionist movement much earlier in the 1930s, and that was that the objective should be for the Zionist movement to seize as much land as possible and leave as few Palestinians as possible in that land. So, land yes, people no, might have been a shorthand slogan for the movement. And he has demonstrated from historical records, Israeli archives in particular, that in 7 to 8 months, starting in March 1948, the Zionist movement expelled, now consider this in terms of any country, 1/2 of the population of the whole country. 1/2 of the population of the whole country. And destroyed 1/2 of the villages and towns of the whole country. And seized the assets of the expelled people, including the cultural assets, as their own. And that this plan that was implemented in 7 to 8 months was formulated consciously by the leadership of the Zionist movement in weekly meetings held in a particular building in Tel Aviv. That is documented. He says that these events of ethnic cleansing were witnessed and recorded by Red Cross observers, foreign reporters, United Nations representatives at the time. They were not published, but they remain as sources for historical research which he has used. Henry Siegman, a research professor at the premier English Institution for Study of the Middle East, SOAS, the School of Oriental and Asian Studies in London, and who is an American and was a former member of the U.S. Council on Foreign Relations from 1994 to 2006, makes clear of the events that happened in a period which again is critical, that is 1967, when Israel conquered the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem. And in the immediate aftermath of that war, according to Siegman, it was clear in all the discussions of the Israeli military and government officials that they never had intention of releasing from their control any of the territory they had conquered. Contrary to a kind of popular mythology, which many people have, that Israel was always interested in a two-state solution and leaving perhaps 20% of the territory to the Palestinians, 20% of historic Palestine. Rather, they formalized a policy that would not declare any particular objectives on their part, but simply, as they put it, create facts on the ground. That is, they would build settlements, they would seize lands, but they would never declare a specific objective. They would never declare openly that they had no intention of releasing from their control any of this conquered territory. And there are intelligence reports to this effect. In 1967, Israel's foreign minister, a man called Abba Eban, asked the legal counsel for the foreign ministry what was the legality of building settlements in this conquered territory. The legal expert in the Israeli foreign ministry responded, I quote, "Civilian settlement in the administered territories contravenes the explicit provisions of the Fourth Geneva Convention. The prohibition," he stressed, "is categorical and is not conditioned on the motives or purposes of the transfer of population, and is aimed at preventing colonization of conquered territory by citizens of the conquering state. That is, the Israeli foreign minister was advised by his legal expert, we Israelis have absolutely no right under law to build settlements, to move people into this territory, or to remove people from this territory. They simply ignored that advice. And in much later years, in 2005, the then Prime Minister, Ariel Sharon, asked a member of his government, Talia Sasson, to form a commission and to investigate the legality of the settlements that had been developed. And she reported that they were illegal according even to Israeli law, and that they had been supported nonetheless by every government ministry, the Israeli military, and the Israeli Secret Service. And Sharon took the findings, and the ministers promptly buried the report. So all these actions were taken in full cognizance of their illegality and indefensibility under law, both Israeli and international law. Today we have, underreported certainly, but nonetheless, somewhere in our consciousness, an awareness of what is happening to the people in Gaza. 1.5 million people living in what many have referred to as the world's largest open-air prison. When some weeks ago, 500,000 of those people, desperately needing medication, food, and other daily survival elements, broke through the wall into the boundary with Egypt, there were very few people in the world who did not suddenly say, what would bring 500,000 people to celebrate getting out of a wall of a territory they've been in? What must have been the conditions in that part of the world that would bring nearly half of the total population to want to get fresh air, like somebody who's been kept smothered in a house with no windows open and fetid atmosphere for weeks and months, suddenly gasping, oh, God, some fresh air. I opened the window. I opened the door. I got a sense of outside. I'm no longer in prison. The conditions in Gaza are almost unimaginable. We have a whole people, 1.5 million, being collectively punished for one and one reason only. What is that reason? Why are they being punished? They voted. They had an election. We go around the world saying, vote, have elections, vote, have elections, be democratic like us. And the former President of the United States, Jimmy Carter, said this was the fairest, one of the fairest elections he had ever observed. But there was a problem with that election. They elected the wrong people. And for that, they are being punished. And the people who are being punished are women, children, men too. Punished with what? Punished with denial of food. Punished with denial of medications. Punished with denial of power, electric power. Punished with having lakes of raw sewage break through the banks that have contained them and flooding their residences, drowning some in that. fully in the awareness of the people who are imposing this siege, the Israeli state, the Israeli government. Colonization, which is what Pape says Israel is a project of the 19th century, creating colony, settlers taking control over land where others lived, expelling them from it, ruling over them, setting boundaries for their existence. Colonization, wherever it has appeared in the 19th or 20th century, is at core racist, because you can only impose that pattern of oppression if you believe that your needs and your human existence is superior to others' needs and others' capacities. So it shouldn't be surprising that according to the Israeli Association for Civil Rights in a survey done in December of last year, 50% of Israelis said they did not want to live in the same building, befriend, or let their children befriend Arabs. Israelis almost never refer to Palestinians, they call them Arabs. Or let Arabs in their home. And over 2/3 of Israeli teenagers believe Arabs are less intelligent, uncultured, and violent than are Jews. The Deputy Minister of Defense, this is no minor post in an Israeli government, threatened the people of Gaza with what? A Holocaust. He used the word Shoah, which in Israeli Hebrew discussion means the Nazi extermination of Jews. That a Deputy Minister of Defense could use that language and that historical reference as a description of a present-day policy cannot be ignored as a marker of the character of the Israeli state. A senior cabinet minister in the Israeli government has declared that he wants to get rid of all members of parliament who are Palestinian. Now, take into account, these are citizens of Israel who were elected in exactly the same way as this senior cabinet minister was elected. And he said, Arabs out, Arabs out. It is illegal for Jewish Israelis, according to a recent law just passed by the Israeli parliament, to have their cars repaired by a Palestinian mechanic in the West Bank. There are graffiti on Palestinian homes which say, Arabs to the gas chambers, written by Jewish settlers. There are roads in the West Bank that are for Jews only. Imagine driving in Victoria. I don't know where you want to drive to Duncan? Sorry, are you Christian? Or maybe a requirement only for Buddhists. There is a rabbi who declared, this is a senior rabbi, who declared that the life of one yeshiva a Jewish boy in a religious school, is worth more than the lives of, how many? 1,000. 1,000 Arabs. That's his mathematics. Now, all these things are examples of what should not be surprising in a colonial situation, in my view. As for human rights violations, well, you can read umpteen numbers of them in Amnesty reports, Human Rights Watch, United Nations agency reports. All have extensively documented continuing and systematic violation of Palestinian rights and international law. So I think that a campaign of boycott, divestment, and sanctions does have moral credibility in terms of the crimes that are being inflicted by the Israeli state. But I said there's another criteria, and that is, has Israel shown any responsiveness to reasoned criticism, at least occasionally, if not sufficiently, to make it morally credible that we should pursue the path of dialogue instead of boycott, divestment, or sanctions? Well, it really is quite the opposite. Israel is an exceptionally, its state, self-righteous, dismissive of criticism, and denunciatory of its critics. I challenge you to bring forward examples of responsiveness to critical comment on the various matters that I have mentioned here as documented cases of violation of rights. But just to list a few, Israel was admitted to the United Nations in 1948 on accepting a condition that it implement the right of Palestinian refugees who had been expelled between 46 and 48 to return to their homes. Israel agreed to do that in order to become part of the United Nations, and then forgot about it. Just, gosh, Mom, I just forgot. I should have washed the dishes. The United Nations Security Council unanimously in 1967 passed Resolution 242 calling for Israel to withdraw from the territories it conquered in 1967. What has Israel said in response to that